is it that in many contexts of our world, religion appears to be more part of the problem than the solution? It is simply not good enough to say that this is not religion, as indeed Archbishop Sentamu indicated. The 11th century Spanish Jewish thinker Yehuda Halevi suggests that the human proclivity to abuse power is at the root of this abuse, that the marriage of religion to power inevitably leads to the abuse of religion. Yet much violence in the name of religion in our world derives precisely from powerlessness, reflecting the alienation of the marginalized. And on the other hand, many are attracted to violent extremism. Many of those attracted to violent extremism are not from impoverished backgrounds, or Osama bin Laden was a case in point. So the answer to the question is complex. Nevertheless, much has to do with the socio-cultural, territorial, and political context in which religion functions. Because religion seeks to give meaning and purpose to our understanding of who we are, it is inextricably bound up with all the different components of human identity, from the most basic, such as family, through the larger components of communities, ethnic groups, nations, and peoples, to the widest components of humanity and creation as a whole. These components of human identity are the building blocks of our psycho-spiritual well-being, and we deny them at our peril. Scholars, ethologists, sociologists studying the human modern condition have pointed out just how much the counterculture, drug abuse, violence, cults, etc. are a search for identity on the part of those who have lost the traditional compasses of orientation. In the relationship between religion and identity, the components, or circles within circles of our identity, affirm who we are, but by definition, at the same time, they affirm whom we are not. Whether the perception of distinction and difference is viewed positively or negatively depends upon the context in which we find or perceive ourselves to be. Sociologists have pointed out how much stronger identities become under threat. And because religion is so inextricably bound up with identity, religion itself acquires far greater prominence in times and places of conflict, nurturing and strengthening the identity that senses itself as threatened. However, the character that religion assumes under such circumstances is often not just one of nurturing, but often of self-preoccupation and even self-righteousness, often disregarding the needs and the claims of the other, and even demonizing the other to the point of portraying him or her, in the words of the historian Richard Hafstadter, as a perfect picture of malice. The image I find useful in explaining the behavior of particular identities, for good or bad, is that of a spiral. These different components of identity, as I mentioned before, are circles within circles. When they feel secure within the wider context in which they find themselves, they can open up to, affirm, and enrich the wider circle of society. However, when these components of human identity do not feel welcome in the broader context, they isolate themselves, cut themselves off from society in one form or another, and compound the alienation, indeed mutual alienation. Obviously, societies must defend themselves against violent threats. However, it is not enough to be reactive. It is critical to be proactive as well. This requires addressing the sources of alienation, as has been mentioned a number of times over these days. Not only poverty and political marginalization, but also the social marginalization that leads people and groups to feel that they are not considered of value, that they are unwanted and unwelcome in the wider society. In other words, what is essential for the task that we are addressing today is the traditional religious value of hospitality. Abraham is the biblical and Quranic model of hospitality. Our traditions teach that his tent flaps were open to all. No prior conditions, criteria, no judgment, but sincere welcome of the other, all others, all created in the divine image. Religious communities and religious leadership accordingly have a crucial role to play in this regard, as already expounded beautifully by my illustrious colleagues before me this morning. The title of our deliberations accurately implies that it is not possible to have a society in which the different cultural and religious components play a constructive role if it is not an inclusive society. And that means giving communities a sense that they are welcome, that they are regarded and respected and are engaged as constructive contributors to the well-being of society as a whole. More often than not, it is violent, extremist, isolationist elements that are highlighted by both political culture and the media. This is natural, as these do pose a threat to the well-being of society. However, this disproportionate focus actually strengthens the voice of such extremist elements and marginalizes the voice of the enlightened and inclusive approaches within those communities. In order to promote tolerance, reconciliation, and harmony, it is necessary for politicians and civic leaders and media at large to give greater visibility to those enlightened, inclusive voices and thus demonstrate to the respective communities that it is precisely this approach that is valued and respected, enhancing the esteem of the community concerned in the wider context and serving the well-being of all, as indicated by the Secretary General in his opening remarks this morning. In conclusion, religious leaders can indeed play a critically important role in fostering peaceful societies and in countering violent extremism, if they are provided with the platforms and the visibility by and with the leaders of states and civil society. It is the states and international organizations that have the means to empower constructive religious voices. If they do so, then religion can be as it should be, not part of the problem, but part of the solution for the flourishing of humankind. Thank you.
I thank the International Director of Interreligious Affairs of the American Jewish Committee for his statement. I now give the floor to Rabbi Arthur Schneer, President of the Appeal of Conscience Foundation.
Your Excellencies, Your Eminences, distinguished spiritual leaders, and ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank President Sam Katusa, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and the high-level representative of the Alliance of Civilization, Nasir Abdulaziz Al-Nasser, for bringing us together for a timely and important discussion of how each one of us can contribute to building bridges of tolerance and foster peaceful societies in the face of violent extremism. Before I proceed, with your permission, Mr. President, Secretary General, just a few days ago, lifesavers of UNICEF, their life was snuffed out. The minibus attack. A few days earlier, again, lifesavers of the United Nations in Mali. And that continues and continues. Let us all rise for a moment of prayer. Let them rest in peace, and may their families be given strength to cope with that challenge and also a resolve. The United Nations will not be deterred from standing with the people and giving them succor and giving them help and giving them aid at time of need. If you just rise for a moment and whatever prayer you want to offer on that. May God grant all UN peacekeepers his protective guidance and spare them from further trouble. Thank you. "70 years ago, after the devastation reaped by World War II and the Holocaust, the United Nations was founded in the belief that all nations could be unified in peaceful coexistence. I'm a survivor of the Holocaust. I know what ethnic cleansing is all about. I experienced racism, desecration of holy sites, the burning of my synagogue on Kristallnacht, November 10, 1938, the extermination of my family in Auschwitz and Terezin. As Secretary General, you went to Auschwitz and you paid respect to those who were murdered. So you're talking to someone who had a life experience, and nothing is better than a life experience in order to see the crisis we're facing at this time. Yes, I did experience, and so many others who lived through those horrible days of World War II, mankind's capacity for cruelty and inhumanity. And in spite of these experiences, I have not lost faith in God. I have not lost faith in man. And I have not lost faith in people's yearning for peace. I believe passionately in our greater capacity for peace, the same belief in peace upon which the United Nations was established. I also believe that every conflict comes to an end. 100-year war, 30-year war, World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, you name it. Every conflict comes to an end. Too many millions of victims as a result of those conflicts. And we, religious leaders, must see to it that every conflict end should be hastened. Tragically, we face once again a volatile world in conflict. We need an alliance of all us who are assembled here today to move toward peace. It cannot be denied, as we have heard, that religion, when wrongfully interpreted, is a factor in these conflicts. Today, over 30 conflicts around the globe, in the Middle East, East Asia, Africa, beyond, are fueled by what I call the religious TNT, that powerful corruption of religion that can spark zealotry, terrorism, and disregard for the human life of the other. It seems every day we see graphic examples of extremists and radicals hijacking religion, misusing and abusing God's name to legitimize their barbarism. As the title of today's debate illustrates, we must promote tolerance as a first step to counter this criminal abuse of religion and combat violent extremism. I would, however, offer a comment. The word tolerance is really a misnomer. I tolerate you puts me in a superior position. I keep up with you. I tolerate you. You're a second-class citizen. You are not equal to me. So I would respectfully propose that instead of using the word tolerance, we speak in terms of mutual acceptance, mutual understanding, and get away from this definition of tolerating the other, tolerating the stranger, tolerating the immigrant. No, they're equal with us. They're all God's creations. So we have to strive for mutual acceptance. That's what we must strive for. Love thy stranger. and v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor, is repeated 36 times in the Torah. This principle of respect for those who are different is universal. I can cite you, but I didn't want to be too long. Similar guiding principles in the New Testament, the Quran, the sacred texts of Buddhism and Hinduism, and the writings of Guru Nanak, among others. There's a universal message of respecting the other, love fellow human being, mutual acceptance. It is through learning about and respecting those who are strangers to us, the person of a different faith, the immigrant, and even the person who has yet to show us the willingness to understand and respect us, that we can truly build inclusive societies. Not an easy task. But let me propose 4 essential things we must do in the name of peace. First, whenever I see a church, mosque, or temple burning, I have a flashback. See my synagogue burning on Kristallnacht. The desecration of holy sites, the centers of religious life, leads to the destruction of human life. The destruction of any house of worship, be it church, mosque, synagogue, or temple, is an attack on the jugular vein of a faith community. Faith cannot be protected if worshipers are afraid of being blown up by mobs of hatred in their spiritual home. Worshipers are going to worship, and they have to be afraid of being blown up and not to return home. This is why in 2001, the Appeal of Conscience Foundation initiated a United Nations resolution for the protection of religious sites, which, by the way, was passed unanimously here in the General Assembly and enacted as Resolution A55L81. We must condemn all acts of religious destruction and treat any such acts as an attack on all faiths, not just the particular faith of the holy site that is destroyed. Brothers and sisters, I want you to actually look up that resolution and cite this resolution that was adopted here by consensus to your congregants, to your people. Let them know where the United Nations, all nations, stand for on this particular issue. I repeat, Resolution A55L81, enacted in the year 2001. Those of us who are committed to be guardians of peace and reconciliation must marginalize preachers of hatred who incite violence, demonize other faiths, and help spread any form of xenophobia, be it anti-Semitism, Christianophobia, and Islamophobia. And you know, we heard some wonderful, eloquent speeches. Proverbs tells us life and death are in the power of the tongue. Let's use our tongue to spread love. Let's use our pulpit to preach brotherhood. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. And as leaders, we should use the tongue not to divide, but to unite us. Let me give you a concrete example what religious leaders can do. In 1992, at the height of the former Yugoslavia conflict, my beloved brother, then Archbishop Theodore McCarrick, now Cardinal McCarrick, and the Appeal of Conscience Foundation, which we founded in 1965, brought together the Patriarch Pavle of the Serbian Orthodox Church, Cardinal Kukranic Puljic of Zagreb, the Grand Mufti Solomovsky of Sarajevo. Political leaders were not talking. They were fighting. There was no dialogue between Milosevic and Tushman Izetbegovic. We brought these religious leaders together, and after a tormenting few days in neutral Switzerland, we came up with a consensus. Please pay attention to what we said then and how relevant it is today. A crime perpetrated in the name of religion is the greatest crime against religion. I repeat, and it's not copyright. You may use it. A crime perpetrated in the name of religion is the greatest crime against religion. We believe that true faith stands for life and not for death. Second pillar of building an inclusive society is education. You know, when a child is born, a child is not born with hatred. A child is born with love. Hatred is taught, acquired. So, it's our responsibility as educators that we teach the right thing to our children. How painful it is to see a young lad with a Kalashnikov, 10 years old, teenagers ready to decapitate fellow human beings. So what we have to do, a great task, to make sure that all our children are taught what it means to respect the other. And let us encourage all member states of the United Nations, intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations, and particularly the media and social media, to align with us to promote, through education, a culture of mutual respect and tolerance for the diversity of religions which represent an important aspect of the collective heritage of all mankind. And finally, the third pillar. We have to be the role models. Not easy, but we have to be the role models. And prominently embody the universal principle of respect and acceptance of difference. I am deeply proud that in my synagogue, Park East Synagogue, has become a beacon of interreligious cooperation. My congregation, the Jewish community as such, were greatly honored when His Holiness Pope Benedict, now Emeritus, 16th, came to Park East Synagogue, first papal visit to a synagogue in the United States. But there wasn't only Pope Benedict. It was also His All Holiness the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, the Grand Mufti, His Holiness Alexei, Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, Grand Mufti Church of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Chief Rabbis of Israel and Europe. Now, why do I mention this? This is a message of solidarity, of interreligious cooperation for the benefit of all of God's children. Finally, I believe that not all of us must not only set an example, but we must also hold other leaders and the public to account. Maimonides, who lived, by the way, in the golden age of Spain, Maimonides, defining what the shofar is all about, it's a clarion call to help awaken us from our slumber of indifference. Apathy, indifference, enables the perpetrators of evil to prosper. I personally experienced, and all of us have had the experience, what apathy and indifference leads to. And therefore, persecution of religious minorities in various parts of the world we should react to it, not be silent. And I respectfully suggest, Mr. Secretary General, Mr. President, there ought to be a resolution for the protection of religious minorities in the forthcoming special session of the UN General Assembly, because religious minorities today in the world carry the brunt of pain and suffering. And here I join also a plea on behalf of my Christian brothers and sisters who are today in the front lines of persecution, being oppressed, uprooted, and decapitated. Let us be a voice of conscience, not silence, in the face of what's facing our suffering brothers and sisters. Despite the upsurge of violent fanaticism, true faith has the potential to become a force on behalf of conflict resolution, and I have full faith that we can weather this crisis too, hopefully soon. But we must learn the lesson of Noah and the flood. You know, Noah survived the destruction of a civilization that was full of conflict, hatred, and greed. And to make sure that there is hope, God created a symbol, the rainbow. How many colors does the rainbow have? 7. And every color is distinctly visible, but they blend, they harmonize. This is our challenge. We must respect every color, every culture, every faith community, and assure what the Alliance of Civilizations is trying to do within the framework of the United Nations. Abraham was given a mission. V'hayei bracha, be a blessing. Each one of us are placed on earth for a short period of time with a mission to help God perfect an imperfect world. We're placed on earth, and each one of us can make a difference to help God perfect an imperfect world. So I pray that God may give us the wisdom to be his co-partner in perfecting a world in disarray today. Thank you, and God bless you all.
I thank the President of Appeal of Conscience Foundation for his statement. I now give the floor